God, did she just do that?
That morning in a side conference room buried deep inside Harrington Tower in downtown Chicago, a cup of hot coffee didn't spill onto the floor. It flew straight into a man's face. For a moment, no one screamed. No one moved. Steam rose in the narrow room, carrying the sharp smell of burnt coffee and something heavier beneath it. Shame. The man didn't shout. He didn't curse. He didn't rush to the sink. He simply stood there, lifted his sleeve, wiped his face, and looked directly at the woman holding the now empty cup. Sophia Harrington, 28 years old, the only daughter of Richard Harrington, the man who had built one of Chicago's most powerful real estate and investment empires from nothing. There was no fear in the man's eyes, no anger, just a quiet presence that somehow made the room feel smaller. And in that exact moment, Sophia felt as if an invisible mirror had been pulled in front of her. Right there, in front of 8 frozen witnesses who suddenly forgot how to breathe. She didn't know this moment would undo her life. She didn't know everything she believed about power, control, and standing above others was about to collapse. Before this story goes any further, if you're watching Heaven Walks with Us, leave a short comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Just one line, so we know you're here with us tonight. The room where it happened was not the main boardroom. It sat quietly behind the 14th floor, far from the glass walls, skyline views, and polished wood tables. Harrington Capital proudly showed investors. No panoramic windows, no leather chairs. Just a small conference room with harsh fluorescent lights and the faint scent of industrial cleaner left behind from the morning shift. Sophia Harrington had chosen this room deliberately. Her father wasn't in the building that day. Neither were the senior executives. The people she had summoned were lower-level employees, receptionists, administrative assistants, maintenance staff, people who couldn't decline the invitation, people who didn't have the leverage to push back. To Sophia, this was simply an internal correction. A reminder that order existed because someone at the top enforced it, and Sophia believed, without question, that someone was her. She stood at the head of the table, heels tapping softly against the floor as she paced. Her voice was sharp and controlled, never raised, yet heavy enough to tighten every shoulder in the room. Then the janitor walked in. He hadn't been called. He entered quietly, wearing a faded gray uniform, pushing a small cleaning cart, his mop already damp. He nodded once and began wiping the floor near the door, as if his presence wasn't worth acknowledging. But Sophia noticed. She stopped mid-sentence, looked down at the floor, then up at the man bending low with the mop. "How long have you worked here?" she asked, irritation barely disguised. The man looked up. His eyes were calm, strangely calm for a room vibrating with tension. 4 years, he said. No apology, no nervous smile, just an answer. Something tightened in Sophia's chest, that familiar discomfort she felt whenever someone didn't react the way they were supposed to. She stepped toward the side table where fresh coffee had been set out. Steam curled upward, bitter and dark. 4 years, she repeated as if weighing an unimportant number. Then you should know how things are done properly. The man didn't respond right away. He simply looked at her, waiting. And in that brief silence, Sophia felt something unsettling. For the first time, she had the strange sense that she was being observed, not the other way around. Her fingers tightened around the cup, and then everything slipped out of her control. The silence in the room stretched just long enough to become uncomfortable. 8 people stood frozen around the table, eyes darting between Sophia and the janitor, instinctively sensing that something had shifted, but not knowing how or why. The man lowered his gaze back to the floor and returned to his work. The mop moved slowly, methodically, tracing the same pattern it always had. No rush, no defensiveness. That calm unsettled Sophia more than open defiance ever could. She took another step forward, the sharp sound of her heels echoing off the bare walls. Her reflection caught the edge of the dark screen, mounted at the far end of the room. Hair flawless, posture perfect, authority intact, at least on the surface. "Do you understand how much this building costs to maintain?" she asked, her voice tight now, edged with something personal. "Do you understand what kind of standards are expected here?" The man stopped moving. He lifted the mop from the floor and set it against the cart, careful, deliberate. Then he straightened and met her eyes again. "The room was clean this morning," he said, "at 5:30. The words landed softly, but they landed. A quiet murmur rippled through the employees. Someone inhaled sharply. Another person dropped their gaze, already bracing for impact. Sophia laughed. It was short, sharp, empty. "Then you did a terrible job," she said, "because clearly it isn't clean." The man didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step back. "It was done properly," he said simply. Not defiant, not arrogant, just true. Something flared inside Sophia, a heat that had nothing to do with the coffee. "You're contradicting me," she snapped. "I'm stating what happened." The room seemed to shrink. Sophia felt the familiar surge, the one she mistook for strength, the one that came when she needed to reassert control, quickly and publicly. She grabbed the cup from the side table. The coffee inside was still dangerously hot. "Do you think you can talk back and still get paid?" she said. "Do you think you can embarrass me in my own building?" The man looked at the cup, then back at her. "You're not here because the room is dirty," he said calmly. "You're here because you need to feel above someone." Time slowed. The receptionist near the door gasped under her breath. Another employee closed his eyes as if hoping he wouldn't have to witness what came next. Sophia felt the words hit her like a slap. "How dare you?" she said, stepping closer. "You have no idea who you're talking to." The man didn't move. "You waited until your father wasn't here," he continued, voice steady. "You scheduled this when the executives were gone. You called in only the people who couldn't defend themselves." Her stomach dropped. She didn't know how he knew that. "Stop talking," she hissed. "You don't act like this with everyone," he said. "Only with the ones you believe are safe to humiliate." That was the moment, the precise moment when humiliation turned into rage. Sophia's hand moved before her mind caught up. The cup tipped. The coffee flew. It struck the man full in the face. Steam burst into the air. Liquid spilled down his cheeks, his jaw soaking into the faded collar of his uniform. The skin around his eyes flushed red instantly. No one breathed. No one moved. The man staggered half a step, then steadied himself. Slowly he lifted his sleeve and wiped his eyes. Coffee dripped onto the floor, pooling near his worn shoes. He didn't scream. He didn't curse. He didn't run. He simply looked at Sophia. And in that look, something broke. Not in him, in her. For a moment, no one moved. The mop slipped from the man's hand and landed on the floor with a wet thud. Coffee continued to drip from his chin, darkening the front of his uniform. The smell hung in the air, burnt, bitter, inescapable. 8 employees stood frozen, trapped between instinct and fear. No one stepped forward. No one spoke. This wasn't their moment to intervene. They all knew that. Sophia waited for him to react. She expected shouting, threats, panic, something that would justify what she had just done. Instead, the man straightened. He didn't hunch. He didn't shrink. He simply stood there, present, steady, as if humiliation had no weight on him at all. "Leave," Sophia said sharply, breaking the silence. "Get out of this room, now." Her voice cracked like glass, sharp enough to cut, meant to end the moment and restore order. The man didn't move. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time Sophia felt exposed. Not because people were watching, but because he was. "You're afraid," he said quietly. The words landed harder than the coffee had. A receptionist near the wall inhaled sharply. Someone else shifted their weight, already wishing they were anywhere else. "What did you say?" Sophia snapped, stepping closer, her face flushed with anger. "You're afraid," he repeated. "Afraid that if you're not always on top, always in control, then you disappear." Her chest tightened. "You don't know me," she said. "You don't know anything about my life." The man wiped the last of the coffee from his face with his sleeve. "I know your mother died when you were young," he said gently. "And I know your father buried himself in work after that. And I know you learned to confuse absence with abandonment." The room went dead silent. Sophia felt as if the air had been punched out of her lungs. "How do you know that?" she whispered, her anger giving way to something colder. "You learned early," he continued, "that attention had to be earned. That power meant visibility, That if you didn't make yourself larger than others, you risked becoming invisible. Her hands trembled at her sides. "You're just a janitor," she shouted suddenly, desperate to reclaim ground. "You don't get to analyze me. You don't get to talk to me like this." The man's voice didn't change. "I recognize pain when it disguises itself as cruelty," he said. "I see it every day." Sophia clenched her fists. Rage surged, hot and sharp. But beneath it, something else stirred. Fear, because he was right, and she hated him for it. "You don't hate me," he said, as if hearing her thoughts. "You hate what I represent." She laughed, a brittle sound. "And what's that?" "A person who doesn't need power to have dignity," he answered. "Someone who can be humble without being weak." Her eyes burned. "Stop," she said. "Just stop talking." But he took a single step forward. Instinctively, Sophia stepped back. "You threw coffee at me to make yourself feel bigger," he said calmly. "But the only person diminished here is you." His voice carried something unfamiliar now, something heavier, something that seemed to fill the room. "Cruelty doesn't give power," he said. "It only reveals emptiness." Something inside Sophia cracked. Not regret, not yet. Just the terrifying realization that no amount of control could silence the truth once it had been spoken. The room emptied in silence. Sophia stood rigid as employees filed out one by one. Eyes lowered, footsteps hurried. No one spoke to her. No one dared. The last to leave was the receptionist, a woman in her 50s, who paused just long enough to whisper, almost to herself, "He told the truth." Then the door closed. For a moment, Sophia was alone with the echo of her own breathing and the dark stain of coffee spreading across the carpet. She told herself she had won. He was gone. Order restored. She always won. 2 hours later, she sat in her penthouse overlooking the city, a glass of French wine in one hand, a streaming show playing in the background. The lights of Chicago glittered like proof that nothing had really changed. But the words wouldn't stop replaying. Cruelty doesn't give power. It only reveals emptiness. She took a long drink, trying to drown the thought. Her phone vibrated. Once, twice, then again. By the time she looked down, there were 47 unread messages. She frowned and opened the first. "Sophia, what the hell is this?" A link followed. She tapped it. The video had been uploaded 90 minutes earlier. It already had over 200,000 views. The headline read, "Billionaire heiress throws scalding coffee at janitor inside corporate office." Her stomach twisted. The video started just seconds before the coffee flew. The angle was perfect, clear, unforgiving. You could hear her voice, every word, every insult. And worse, you could hear his. "You're not here because the room is dirty. You're here because you need to feel above someone." The comments exploded beneath it. "This man has more dignity in his pinky than she has in her entire body. She picked the wrong person. The way he didn't flinch. This is real strength." "Who is he?" Sophia scrolled, hands trembling. More clips, more angles. Someone had slowed the footage, analyzing the moment the coffee hit his face, and the moment he looked back at her without hatred. Another post called him the calmest man in the room. Someone else wrote, "This is what Jesus would sound like today." Her chest tightened. She opened social media, then another platform, then another. The video was everywhere. Morning news producers were already dissecting it. Commentators debated power dynamics, workplace abuse, entitlement culture. Her name began trending alongside words like corporate cruelty and abuse of power. She tried calling the company's communications director. No answer. Legal, voicemail. Her personal PR consultant. Nothing. Then her phone rang. Her father's name lit up the screen. She hesitated, just a second too long, then answered. "Dad, where are you?" Richard Harrington's voice was colder than she had ever heard it. "I can explain," she said quickly. "The video is out of context. I was—" "Sophia," he interrupted. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. "I watched you throw hot coffee into a man's face." Her throat closed. "I'm coming to you now," he said. "We're going to talk." The line went dead. Sophia stood frozen in the center of the room, the wine glass slipping from her fingers, red liquid soaking into the expensive rug. For the first time in her life, she felt something she couldn't control. Fear, because the world wasn't just watching. The world was listening, and it was siding with the man she thought she could humiliate without consequence. Richard Harrington arrived 40 minutes later. Sophia heard the key in the door before she saw him, the familiar sound cutting through the silence of the penthouse like a warning bell. She had rehearsed at least 10 different explanations while waiting, each one carefully framed, each one designed to soften what the world had seen. None of them survived the moment she looked at her father. He stood in the doorway without moving, 63 years old, gray hair, calloused hands that had once carried bricks and tools before they ever signed contracts. He wore a simple jacket, worn shoes, habits he never abandoned, even after becoming wealthy. Sophia used to hate that about him. She thought it made them look small. Now, facing him, she felt small. "Show me the video," he said. It wasn't a request. "It's out of context," Sophia said quickly. "You don't understand what led up to. Show me the video." Her hands shook as she unlocked her phone and handed it over. Richard pressed play. Sophia turned away, but she couldn't escape the sound. Her own voice filled the room, sharp, dismissive, cruel, the hiss of coffee leaving the cup, the wet slap against skin, the man's calm response, his words steady and precise, cutting straight through her like a blade. When the video ended, Richard didn't speak right away. He sat down slowly, as if the weight of what he'd just watched had finally reached his bones. "He was right," he said at last, his voice low. Sophia spun back toward him. "Dad, he was right," he repeated, "about all of it." She shook her head, desperate. "That's not who I am. I was just trying to maintain order. They don't respect—" "Respect?" Richard snapped, suddenly loud enough to make her flinch. He never raised his voice. Never. "Do you think respect comes from burning a man's face with coffee?" Silence fell hard. "I built this company from nothing," he continued, standing now. "When your mother died, I cleaned bathrooms. I washed dishes. I carried concrete on my back to keep food on the table." Sophia's chest tightened. "And you," he said, pointing toward the phone on the table, "you used everything I gave you to hurt someone who couldn't fight back." "I didn't mean to." "That's the worst part," Richard said quietly. "You didn't even think about it." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Richard picked up the phone and set it down with care. "Tomorrow morning you're coming with me to the office." "Why?" Sophia asked, her voice small. "Because the company is burning," he said. "Contracts are being canceled. Employees are calling lawyers. And the name I spent 30 years building is being dragged through the street because of you." Her eyes burned. "I don't recognize the woman in that video," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "And I don't know how to defend her." He turned toward the door. "Get some rest," he added without looking back. "Tomorrow, we deal with the damage." The door closed behind him. Sophia stood alone in the penthouse, surrounded by glass, art, and silence. She slid down onto the couch, breath shallow, heart racing. For the first time, she understood something she had never allowed herself to feel. Her father wasn't angry, he was disappointed, and that realization frightened her more than losing everything else combined. Morning came without relief. Sophia followed her father into Harrington Tower just after sunrise, the city still quiet, the lobby unusually empty. Normally, the building hummed with movement, assistants rushing, coffee machines hissing, executives exchanging clipped greetings. That morning, there was only silence. Heads turned as they passed. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A receptionist looked up, recognized Sophia, and then deliberately looked away. An executive stepped into the elevator, saw her reflection in the mirrored wall, and chose to wait for the next one. Sophia felt it in her chest. Something heavy, something earned. They reached Richard's office. He closed the door and gestured for her to sit. "Before the board arrive," he said, "there's something you need to hear." Sophia folded her hands tightly in her lap. "I didn't raise you to be cruel," Richard continued, "but I did raise you to believe that strength comes from control." She looked up. "I taught you that order matters more than compassion," he said, "that efficiency excuses damage. And I told myself that was leadership." He paused, choosing his words. "I told myself that because it helped me survive." Sophia felt her throat tighten. "You did what you had to do." So did you, Richard replied, and that's what scares me. He leaned forward. I spent decades stepping on people who couldn't fight back. I justified it by telling myself I was building something bigger, but I never stopped to ask who I was becoming in the process. Sophia swallowed hard. When I saw that video, he said quietly, I didn't just see you. She knew what he meant. I saw myself, he finished. The door knocked softly. The board had arrived. The meeting that followed felt less like discussion and more like judgment. Contracts canceled overnight. Stock prices down double digits. 7 formal complaints filed with HR, 3 already escalating to legal action. One executive read the numbers out loud while another slid printed headlines across the table. Corporate heiress exposed in workplace abuse scandal. Power without accountability. Who really runs Harrington Capital? Sophia sat perfectly still as each word landed. When the meeting finally ended, Richard looked exhausted, pale. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the table. Dad, Sophia said instinctively, standing. I'm fine, he replied, though his voice lacked conviction. I just need air. They stepped into the hallway together. Halfway to the elevator, Richard stopped. He pressed a hand against his chest. Sophia froze. Dad? He tried to take a breath and failed. The world tilted. Employees rushed forward. Someone shouted for security. Another called emergency services. Sophia knelt beside her father, hands shaking as she held his shoulders, begging him to breathe. Sirens filled the air minutes later. At the hospital, the diagnosis came fast and cold. Stress-induced cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but dangerously close. The cardiologist didn't soften the truth. Any more stress in the coming weeks, he said, could be fatal. Sophia sat alone in the waiting room long after the doctor left. The glass doors slid open down the hall, and a janitor pushed a cart past her. Gray uniform, quiet movements, head bowed. She recognized him immediately. The same man. Elias. He stopped near the nurse's station, picked up a dropped cup, wiped the floor where no one else had noticed a spill. When he glanced up, their eyes met. He didn't approach. He didn't speak. He simply nodded, once, and returned to his work. Sophia watched him disappear down the corridor, something twisting deep inside her. For the first time, she understood the cost of what she had done. Not in headlines, not in numbers, but in the fragile rhythm of her father's breath. The board reconvened that afternoon, not in the main conference hall, but in a smaller room overlooking the river. Glass walls, long table, faces set in tight lines. 8 directors sat in silence as Sophia took the empty chair beside her father's. Richard looked smaller now, pale beneath the fluorescent lights, a hospital bracelet still wrapped around his wrist. No one asked how he was feeling. Numbers came first. A financial officer stood and spoke without emotion. 3 major clients had suspended contracts. 2 vendors had terminated agreements outright. The company's stock had dropped 14% since market open, with analysts predicting further decline. Another director slid a stack of papers across the table. Formal complaints, workplace harassment, hostile environment, psychological distress, 7 employees, 7 signatures. Sophia recognized every name. These are just the filings, the legal counsel added. More are likely. The chairwoman leaned forward, fingers interlaced. We need immediate action. She looked directly at Sophia. Public trust has been severely damaged. The video is being replayed on every major outlet. This is no longer a PR issue. This is an identity crisis. Sophia opened her mouth, then closed it again. Another director spoke. We can issue a corporate apology, distance the company from her behavior, emphasize that this does not reflect our values. A third interrupted. That won't be enough. People want accountability. Silence settled heavily over the table. Someone finally said it. She should step down. The words hung in the air. Richard straightened. She's my daughter. And she's costing us millions, another voice replied. You built this company on discipline and order. Right now, the market sees hypocrisy. Sophia felt her heartbeat in her ears. There is another option, the legal counsel said carefully. A full public retraction. Sophia takes personal responsibility, steps away from public-facing duties, commits to corrective action. And who runs the company while Richard recovers? the chairwoman asked. All eyes turned to Sophia. Legally, the counsel said, she's next in line. The irony was brutal. The room filled with murmurs, objections, concerns. No one trusted her. No one believed she deserved the role. But the alternatives were slow, complicated, destabilizing. The chairwoman exhaled sharply. We're trapped, Sophia finally spoke. I caused this, she said, her voice steady but thin. I won't pretend otherwise. The room quieted. I won't hide behind corporate language or advisors, she continued. If I step into this role, it won't be to protect myself. It will be to repair what I broke. A skeptical laugh came from across the table. You expect us to believe that? No, Sophia said. I expect you to watch. The board voted, 4 in favor, 3 against, 1 abstention. Sophia Harrington was named interim CEO. The title landed like a sentence. When the meeting ended, Richard struggled to stand. Sophia caught his arm. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. I didn't save you, he replied quietly. I gave you a chance. Don't waste it. As they left the room, Sophia noticed something strange. The hallway was empty, not because it was late, but because people were avoiding her. She walked past reflective glass and barely recognized herself. Power hadn't disappeared. It had changed shape. And for the first time, she understood that holding it might cost her everything she once used it to protect. The hospital room was too quiet. Machines hummed softly, measuring time in numbers and beeps. Richard Harrington lay still beneath white sheets, oxygen tubing resting against his face, his skin paler than Sophia had ever seen it. She sat in the chair beside him, hands folded, afraid to move. The cardiologist had been clear, painfully clear. It wasn't a full heart attack, he said, eyes steady, professional. But it was close. Extreme stress triggered a serious coronary event. How bad is it? Sophia asked. The doctor hesitated just long enough for her to feel it. If he experiences this level of stress again in the next few weeks, he said, it could be fatal. The word echoed in her head, fatal. Richard opened his eyes briefly. When he saw her, something softened in his expression. Sophia, he whispered. She leaned closer. I'm here. He lifted a hand slightly, motioning for her to listen. Fix this, he said, voice barely audible. Not for the company, for yourself. A nurse stepped in gently. He needs rest. Sophia nodded and stepped into the hallway, her legs weak beneath her. She pressed her back against the cool wall, breathing shallowly, trying to process what was happening. The empire, the board, the headlines. None of it felt real anymore. Only her father's fragile breathing did. At the far end of the corridor, a janitor pushed a cleaning cart. Gray uniform, slow movements, familiar posture. Elias. He wiped down a railing, picked up a disposable cup someone had dropped, straightened a chair left crooked by a hurried visitor. No cameras, no attention. Just work. Sophia watched him from a distance, something tightening in her chest. She half expected him to look back, to say something. He didn't. When he finished the section of hallway, he turned and walked past her without stopping. But as he did, he spoke, quietly without breaking stride. Your father is a good man, he said. Sophia froze. Don't let him pay for your mistakes. He continued down the corridor, disappearing around the corner, leaving her alone with the weight of his words. That night, Sophia sat in the waiting area long after visiting hours ended. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages from advisors, journalists, board members. She ignored them all. For the first time in her life, control felt useless. She stared at the closed door to her father's room and understood something with painful clarity. She could lose him, not to fate, not to randomness, but to the consequences of who she had chosen to be. When she finally stood to leave, her reflection in the glass startled her. She looked older, smaller, stripped of the armor she had worn for so long. And for the first time, she wasn't thinking about how to survive the fallout. She was thinking about whether she deserved to. Sophia returned to the office 2 days later, not because she was ready, but because avoiding it would only confirm what everyone already believed about her. The building felt different now, quieter, heavier. Conversation stopped when she entered a room. Eyes followed her, not with curiosity, but with judgment. She deserved that. Late in the afternoon, she found him. Elias was in a service corridor on the lower floors, mopping near the freight elevators. The lights buzzed softly overhead. No one else was around. She stood there for a long moment, watching him work, unsure how to begin. "Why didn't you sue me?" she asked finally. The question came out sharper than she intended, more accusation than curiosity. Elias didn't look up right away. He finished the section of floor he was cleaning, wrung out the mop, and leaned it against the cart. Then he turned to face her. "A lawsuit can't change a heart," he said. Sophia crossed her arms, defensive by instinct. "Everyone else did. HR, legal, they all filed." "And they had the right," he replied. "What you did harmed them." She nodded once. "So why not you?" He studied her for a moment, not with judgment, but with something closer to patience. "Because punishment alone doesn't heal," he said. "And what you need isn't money taken from you." Her voice dropped. "Then what do I need?" "The truth," he said, "and the courage to face it." She laughed quietly, bitter. "You talk like you're some kind of moral judge." "I'm not," he replied. "I've just seen what happens when people choose pride over truth." Sophia looked away. "My father almost died." "Yes," Elias said softly, "and the company he built is unraveling." She swallowed. "I'm trying to fix it." "From the outside," Mies said, "without repairing what's broken inside." The words stung because they landed exactly where they were meant to. "You think stepping in as CEO fixes anything?" he continued. "You think an apology, no matter how sincere, undoes harm?" "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice breaking. He shook his head. "This isn't about what I want." He stepped closer, not invading her space, just enough for her to feel the weight of his presence. "You can say you're sorry 1,000 times," he said, "but if you don't let the person you were die, you'll only learn to hide better." Tears burned behind her eyes. "So what am I supposed to do?" Elias paused. "Choose truth," he said, "even when it costs you." Silence filled the corridor. For the first time, Sophia didn't have an argument ready. No title, no authority, no strategy. Just the uncomfortable realization that everything she had built her life on, control, dominance, distance, had failed her when it mattered most. As Elias returned to his work, Sophia stood alone, staring at the wet floor reflecting the fluorescent lights. She didn't know how to become someone else, but for the first time she understood she couldn't stay who she was. The communications team begged her not to do it. They offered alternatives, carefully worded statements, controlled interviews, delayed appearances, talking points, legal buffers, crisis scripts polished by people who knew how to make guilt sound professional. Sophia refused all of it. "I'll speak," she said, "alone." The room went quiet. "That's a mistake," someone warned. "You'll lose control of the narrative." She nodded. "I already did." The press conference was scheduled for that evening. No pre-screened questions, no spokesperson, no lawyers at her side, just a podium, a microphone, and a room full of journalists who smelled blood. Cameras flashed as Sophia walked on stage. She looked smaller than usual. No tailored blazer, no dramatic makeup. Just a plain jacket, her hair pulled back, her face pale and tired. She waited until the noise settled. Then she spoke. "I'm not here to defend myself," she said, "and I'm not here to explain context." A ripple moved through the room. "I threw hot coffee at a man who couldn't defend himself," she continued, "and if I hadn't been filmed, I might never have stopped." The words landed hard. A reporter raised his hand immediately. "So you're admitting this is who you are?" "Yes," Sophia said. "Or at least, it was." Murmurs followed. She took a breath. "I've spent my life confusing control with strength. I thought power meant being feared. I was wrong." Another question came, sharp and fast. "Are you only apologizing because you were caught?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "And that's the most shameful part." The room stilled. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to forget what you saw. I'm asking you to watch what I do next." She announced concrete steps, personal accountability. stepping away from public-facing duties, a restitution fund for affected employees, independent oversight, policy changes. Each sentence stripped her of something: status, certainty, pride. When questions resumed, they were ruthless. Do you expect people to believe you've changed overnight? No, she said. Change doesn't happen overnight. And if it looks easy, it isn't real. Is your father protecting you? Her voice caught for just a moment. My father almost died from the stress I caused. He's not protecting me. He's paying for me. The conference ended without applause. Reactions poured in within minutes. Some called it calculated. Some called it too little, too late. Others, quietly, said it felt real. That night, Sophia returned to the building long after everyone else had left. She found Elias in the janitorial supply room, organizing bottles of cleaner on a metal shelf. I did it, she said. I told them everything. He looked at her. Why? Because it was right, she replied, then shook her head. No, because I couldn't carry it anymore. He considered her for a long moment. Words without change are just another performance, he said gently. The world will test you. I know, she said, and I'll fail. Yeah, he agreed. You will. She waited for condemnation. It didn't come. But falling isn't the problem, he added. Staying down is. She exhaled, something loosening inside her chest. For the first time since the coffee flu, Sophia wasn't trying to manage how she looked. She was trying to decide who she would become when no one was watching. The building was nearly empty when Sophia returned. Most of the lights were off, leaving long corridors lit only by emergency strips along the floor. The air felt different at night, quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves were listening. She found him in the janitorial supply room. Elias sat on a narrow bench beside a row of lockers, a gray uniform folded neatly in his hands. A single bulb overhead cast a soft circle of light, leaving the corners in shadow. He looked up as she entered, as though he had been expecting her. I spoke, Sophia said. Her voice sounded smaller here. I didn't hide. I know, he replied. I watched. She swallowed. Now what? Elias stood. There was a subtle shift as he moved. Nothing dramatic, nothing supernatural. Yet the room seemed to expand, as if the space around him had grown larger without changing shape. Now, he said, you need to know who I am. Sophia felt a chill move up her spine. You're the janitor, she said quickly, as if naming it would make it solid. You work nights. You clean floors. He took one step closer, not invading her space, just enough to be unmistakably present. I was standing in front of you when you threw the coffee, he said, and I chose not to respond. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted you to see the difference between power and cruelty. Her breath caught. No, she whispered. This doesn't make sense. I've watched you build walls since you were a child, he continued, voice steady. I saw you turn grief into armor. I saw you choose control because love felt unreliable. Sophia backed against the metal shelf, heart pounding. How do you know that? Because I was there, he said softly. When you cried for your mother. When you learned that attention had to be earned. When you decided it was safer to be feared than to be vulnerable. Her legs trembled. Who are you? She asked. He met her eyes. I am Jesus Christ. The words didn't echo. They didn't thunder. They simply existed. Sophia laughed, a thin, frantic sound. This is stress. I'm breaking. This is my mind trying to cope. He didn't argue. You're not losing your mind, he said gently. You're waking up. Tears blurred her vision. Why didn't you stop me? Because love doesn't control, he answered. You were given freedom, and you used it to hurt. The truth of it crushed her. But I never left you, he continued. Not when you chose cruelty. Not when your father collapsed. Not when the world turned against you. She slid down the wall, collapsing onto the floor. I don't deserve this, she whispered. No one does, he replied. I didn't come for who deserves. I came for who needs. Sophia covered her face, sobbing. Not with anger this time, not with frustration, but with the raw terror of being fully seen. What do I do now? She asked, voice shaking like a child's. You live the truth you just spoke, Jesus said. Not alone. He knelt beside her, Not to lift her, not to remove the pain, but to stay. I'll be with you when you're ashamed, he said, when you fall, when you're tempted to become who you were. She looked at him through tears. Will I fail? Yes, he said kindly. Many times. And you'll stay? Always. When she finally looked up again, the room felt ordinary. The shelves, the lockers, the folded uniform. Jesus stood, calm and unremarkable, as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all. For everyone else, he said, I'm just a janitor, but now you know the truth. He stepped toward the door. The truth will hurt, he added. It will cost you. It will demand that the old you dies. The door opened, then closed. Sophia remained on the floor trembling, the weight of the revelation pressing into her chest. Either she had lost everything, or she had just found it for the first time. The decision came 3 days later. Sophia sat alone in her office before sunrise, the city still dark beyond the glass. Reports lay open on her desk, numbers that hadn't improved, headlines that hadn't softened. Apologies had slowed the bleeding, but nothing had healed. Words weren't enough. She picked up the phone and called Human Resources. I want to work with the janitorial team, she said. 2 mornings a week, starting Monday. Silence on the other end. Ma'am, the voice finally said, careful and confused, you're the interim CEO. I know, Sophia replied, and on Mondays and Wednesdays, from 6 a.m. to noon, I'll be a janitor. The line stayed quiet a moment longer. No cameras, Sophia added. No announcements, just work. When she hung up, her hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a strange, unfamiliar resolve. The news leaked internally before Monday arrived. Group chats filled with disbelief and anger. She's doing this for show. Give her 2 weeks. She'll quit the first time someone talks back. She deserves worse. Sophia saw the messages. Someone from HR sent screenshots anonymously, maybe as a warning, maybe as cruelty. She read them all and said nothing. Monday morning came cold and early. At 5:45 a.m., Sophia entered Harrington Tower through the side entrance. No heels, no makeup, old sneakers, hair pulled back tight. She carried nothing but herself. The janitorial locker room fell silent when she stepped inside. 6 workers stopped mid-motion, faces hardened. No greetings, no curiosity, just resentment. Morning, Sophia said quietly. No one answered. A woman in her 50s spat near Sophia's shoes and walked out without a word. First humiliation, 5 minutes in. The supervisor, Beatrice, entered moments later. She took one look at Sophia and didn't bother hiding her contempt. You're Harrington, she said flatly. Yes. Then grab a bucket and gloves, Beatrice replied. You're starting with the second-floor restrooms. The executive restrooms? Sophia asked instinctively. Beatrice's eyes hardened. Employee restrooms. Sophia nodded. The bathrooms were worse than she imagined. Not filthy, just real, used, human. Hair in drains, soap smeared across sinks, stains that required kneeling to scrub. The smell turned her stomach. She stepped out once, breathed deeply, then went back in. An hour passed. Her back ached. Her hands burned under thin gloves. Sweat dampened her shirt. 2 men from IT walked by laughing. Look at that, one said loudly. The princess scrubbing toilets. Take a picture, the other added. She'll want it for her redemption tour. They laughed and disappeared. Sophia's throat tightened. She wanted to stand up, to remind them who she was, to end it with a single word. Instead, she scrubbed harder. She felt him before she saw him. Elias stood in the doorway, gray uniform, bucket in hand. He didn't step in, didn't interfere. I don't know what I expected, Sophia admitted, not looking up. I thought maybe someone would acknowledge it. He knelt beside her and picked up a cloth. This isn't about recognition, he said. It's about truth. They hate me, she whispered. Yes, he replied, and they have reason. That hurts. It should, he said gently. Pain breaks pride. Without pain, you'd only be performing. He wiped a sink beside her, not faster, not better, just alongside. You'll want to quit, he continued. Your old self will scream. I won't stop you. She looked at him. But you'll stay. I'll be here, he said, to remind you why you chose this. By noon, Sophia could barely stand straight. Beatrice inspected her work and dumped water onto a corner she'd missed. "Do it again," she said. Sophia swallowed the anger burning her chest, took the cloth, and cleaned again. When Beatrice finally nodded, something in her eyes shifted. Not approval, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. It was enough. As Sophia changed back into her clothes, hands raw and trembling, she realized something terrifying and freeing. This wasn't punishment. It was the beginning of a different kind of life, one that cost her everything she used to protect herself with. Weeks passed. Not the kind of weeks that make headlines. No sudden reversals, no public forgiveness, no triumphant speeches, just ordinary days stacked quietly on top of each other. On Mondays and Wednesdays, Sophia arrived before dawn through the side entrance. Same gray uniform, same locker room, same silence. Some people softened, most didn't. Beatrice kept giving her the hardest assignments, overflowing bins, storage rooms no one wanted, floors that needed scrubbing twice. Sophia did them without comment. Not because it earned trust, but because it was the work. Afternoons found her back upstairs in meetings, navigating lawsuits and budgets, absorbing blame without deflecting it. The contrast was exhausting. By night, her hands ached, her back throbbed, and sleep came in short, shallow bursts. The company stabilized, slowly. One client returned, then another. 2 complaints were withdrawn after Sophia met personally with the employees involved, listened without defending herself, and offered restitution that actually cost something. 3 lawsuits remained. She didn't fight them. Some scars were meant to stay. Her father returned to the office part-time after 4 months. He moved slower now, pausing mid-hallway to catch his breath. Sophia watched him with a tight chest, knowing that whatever time remained would always carry the imprint of what she had caused. "I know what you've been doing," Richard said one afternoon, leaning against the doorframe of her office. "The cleaning, the apologies, the silence." She nodded. "It's not enough." "Maybe it never will be," he replied. "But it's real." That was the closest thing to forgiveness she expected. Ilias was still there, sometimes in the mornings, sometimes late at night, always working, always present. He never rushed her, never praised her. He simply stayed. One evening, as they cleaned a deserted hallway, Sophia finally asked the question she'd been holding. "Will you ever leave?" He paused, cloth in hand. "I never left." She looked at him, confused. "Even when you couldn't see me," he continued, "I was there. In every moment you chose control over compassion, in every time you passed someone invisible." "So I'll see you again?" she asked. "Every day," he said. "In the people you choose to treat with dignity, in the work no one applauds, in the truth you live when no one is watching." Months later, the board attempted a vote of no confidence. It failed by 1 vote. The second attempt never came, not because everyone trusted Sophia, but because she no longer ruled by fear. Decisions were slower. Listening replaced commands. Power became service, not dominance. The building changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but subtly. One morning, Beatrice stopped Sophia as she clocked out. "You didn't quit," she said. "No," Sophia replied. "Most would have," Beatrice added. "You're not the girl with the coffee anymore." Sophia nodded. "I'm still learning who I am." Beatrice studied her, then extended a hand. Brief, firm, honest. It mattered more than applause ever had. On a quiet afternoon, Sophia found herself alone, cleaning the 10th floor corridor. No meetings, no cameras, no witnesses. She scrubbed a stubborn mark on the marble, paused, and looked at her hands. Calloused now, cracked. Real. Outside, the city moved on. People hurried. Lives unfolded unseen. Sophia leaned against the window and whispered, "I see now." There was no voice in response, just the quiet certainty that she wasn't alone. Down below, a janitor in a gray uniform exited through the side door, glanced up toward the building, smiled faintly, and walked into the early light. Invisible to those who didn't choose to see, present to those who did. And somewhere in the ordinary rhythm of unseen work, heaven continued to walk with us. Some stories end with applause. This one ends with silence. Not because nothing changed, but because real change doesn't announce itself. Sophia didn't regain her reputation overnight. Some people never forgave her. Some scars never faded. Her father never fully recovered his health. The company never erased its stain completely. And that matters because grace is not the erasing of consequences. Grace is the decision to stay when consequences remain. What transformed Sophia wasn't the viral video. It wasn't public shame. It wasn't even the revelation she experienced. It was the slow, painful choice to live differently when no one was watching, to scrub floors without recognition, to listen without defending herself, to serve without needing control. Jesus didn't remove her burden. He walked beside her while she carried it. And that may be the most uncomfortable truth in this story, because most of us will never get a dramatic moment where Jesus looks us in the eyes and says his name. Our revelation is quieter. It happens in the grocery line, in the workplace, in the moment we're tempted to dismiss someone because we can. Jesus said it plainly, "Whatever you did to the least of these, you did to me." Not poetically, literally. So the question this story leaves us with isn't whether Sophia changed. It's this: who are we treating as invisible? What armor have we built to protect our wounds? Sarcasm, control, distance, indifference. And are we willing to let that armor fall, knowing it will hurt? Because healing doesn't begin when we look good. It begins when we're honest. Some things will never be fixed. Some people will never forgive us. Some consequences will always remain. That isn't cruelty. That's justice mixed with mercy. Mercy that doesn't erase the past but redeems the future one unseen choice at a time. If this story spoke to you tonight, we invite you to walk with us. Subscribe to Heaven Walks with Us for more stories that don't promise easy answers, but offer something deeper. And if you feel led, leave a comment with just one sentence. Tonight, I choose dignity. Not for us, for yourself. Because sometimes heaven doesn't descend in light or thunder. Sometimes heaven walks quietly beside us. In the work no one applauds. In the truth we live when no one is watching. And that is where real transformation begins.